We now live in a time where the threat from nuclear attack is much less, but it's still present, even if it may have moved to a different area of the globe. So, with the advancement of technology, can we stop a missile attack once you've started? Ever since the first missiles were developed by the Germans, in the latter part of the Second World War, they have struck fear into the heart of many, certainly those in the vicinity of the receiving end. The primary reason for this is the way they deliver their payload. Unlike planes, or cruise missiles, which by comparison, are quite slow and travel normally at subsonic speeds, leaving susceptible to anti-aircraft fire or surface-to-air missiles. ICBM is usually launched high above the atmosphere into space, where the warhead thing separates from a main body, and it falls back to Earth. Because of the ballistic trajectory, the speed of these warheads, even when they come through the denser atmosphere, is still in a region of 15 to 20,000 miles an hour, or 24 to 31,000 kilometers an hour, up to 5 miles or 8.6 kilometers per second, around Mach 25. It's the speed which makes them so difficult to stop, because everything happens so fast: the detection of an attack, the coordination of countermeasures, and the launch of any defensive options, has to happen within minutes, and is one of the most difficult technical and engineering challenges around. And that's without the attacker's countermeasures, which we'll come to later. In order to look at stopping a missile, we have to find its vulnerability. So, for that we have to understand trajectory phase, which is made up of 3 parts. The first part is the boost phase. This is when it's launching and accelerating up to space, and lasts around 4 minutes, taking the missile to a height of around 90 to 125 miles, or around 150 to 200 kilometers. Then there is a second mid-course phase. This is where the boost engines burn out, and it travels through space and through the highest point of its trajectory. This is also the longest phase, taking around 20 minutes. The third and final phase is the terminal phase. This is where the warhead re-enters the atmosphere, and forced towards its target. This is also the shortest, which lasts around 30 seconds to 1 minute. Before anything can be done, you have to detect when a launch has happened. Today, we have satellites with infrared sensors. These are constantly on the lookout for telltale heat plume from rocket engines. Before the advent of the detection satellites, the only way to know a launch occurred was some early warning radar posts detecting that an object has risen quickly above a certain altitude. It's this first boost phase, when the missiles are at their most vulnerable, and ironically, the most difficult to get at. Although they are quite slow moving to start with, they accelerate extremely rapidly. To shoot down a missile, you need another even faster missile. The problem here is that they could be deep within enemy territory on mobile launchers, or even at sea, long from ships or submarines, or too far away from a BMS. Other types of weapons, such as high-power airborne lasers, can shoot down missiles, but they have to be relatively close. Because the atmosphere diffuses the laser beam over longer distances, making them ineffective. You also have to have these airborne lasers in the air all the time, or cruising close to the known launch positions, or national borders. Something which would raise tensions even more. If you can't hit the missile when it's in boost phase, then the second mid-course phase when it's in spaces is next best place to attack. This is the longest phase, lasting up to 20 minutes. But it's here that the ICBM can fight back with countermeasures. Many ICBMs can hold more than one warhead. International treaties limited 10 separately targeted warheads, but that's not all. To confuse the defenders' detection and tracking systems, ICBMs will also carry decoys, Mylar balloons, which will inflate when warheads detach. These floats along with the missile debris and the warheads, and often are shaped and painted to look like warheads, to the defenders' radar systems. These all look like potential targets. But which ones do you go for? With a limited number of ABMs available, pick the wrong ones and you will be letting the real boys through. There have been several attempts to make systems that try to destroy the missiles advance in space. The most famous was Reagan's Star Wars, or the Strategic Defense Initiative. This was to build a space-based defense system, using high-powered lasers to disable multiple targets before they fell back to Earth. The technology, on the other hand, was not capable of delivering this during the 80s, and it's only really starting to become practical now. The method which has been proven to work, although on a limited scale, and against a limited number of targets, just normally one at a time so far, is the kinetic impact, or kill vehicle. These are small, non-explosive devices, that weigh around 4 kilos, or 10 pounds, that are launched into space on an ICBM, to intercept the incoming targets. These are released once in space, and have onboard navigation thrusters, so they can be guided to crash into the oncoming warheads of decoys. In the mid-2000s, this idea was expanded with the MKV, or multiple kill vehicle. The Defender's carrier missiles would hold a number of these, maybe a dozen also, and once released, they would effectively form a cloud, that in theory would target all the potential targets, both real and decoys. But, this is still an extremely difficult operation to pull off. As the missile detection systems have to use high-resolution, X-band radar, and advanced image recognition, to be able to identify all the potential targets, and weed output warheads from a missile debris and the decoys. It then sends, what it thinks are the real target coordinates, to MKV's own tracking system for the final lock, whilst the MKV and the target have a closing speed of more than 30,000 kilometers, or 18,000 miles an hour. The other problem here, is number of potential targets. It's extremely unlikely that just one ICBM will be launched. In a real attack, dozens of ICBMs will be launched, and arrive in waves from different launch locations, each with multiple warheads and decoys. This would just simply overwhelm any defense system. Even if it was a limited attack, the attacker has probably to get only maybe 20% through, but the defender has to shoot down 100%. Something that in real life with current technology would be virtually impossible. If this fails, then there is just the final terminal phase. But this is very short, typically under a minute, and the velocity of the warheads is 5 miles, or 8 kilometers per second range. Early defense systems use nuclear-tipped missiles, which would explode near the approaching warheads, in an attempt to knock out their guidance, and arming electronics with an electromagnetic pulse. With newer radiation-hardened control electronics, and the side effects of dozens of Hiroshima-sized high-altitude errors above your own territory, the idea was dropped. This means that the area being targeted, such as a city command center, missile or even a flotilla of ships, must have ICBMs very close. For undefended areas, there would be simply too little time for an ICBM to intercept a warhead before it is detonated. Again, these systems are either kinetic weapons, which have to hit the target, or have proximity fuses, and detonate close to the target. Current systems can launch multiple targets. Many tests have worked, but none have been proven in a real-world attack. In the end, we still cannot defend against an all-out attack. So, we have to fall back on the 60-year-old policy of the appropriately named MAD. MAD, mutually assured destruction, in order to keep the peace, by making nuclear war just not worth the consequences for either side. So again, thanks for watching, and please subscribe and share.